What in the world are you doing to my son? William Harris stood frozen in the doorway, his heart pounding so hard it felt like it was trying to break out of his chest. Grace Abraham, the friendly nanny he had hired just 3 weeks ago to help with his baby, was sitting calmly in the old rocking chair, holding his 5-month-old son, and she was feeding him. She was breastfeeding little Adrian. Grace's eyes flew wide open in surprise and her whole body went stiff like a statue. Very carefully, she helped the baby stop feeding and cuddled him close against her shoulder. "Mr. Harris, please just let me explain," she said, her voice soft but serious. "Explain." William's voice shook with a hot, bubbling anger he could barely control. "You think you can just touch my child like that? Feed him like you're his mother? You have no right." Grace stood up slowly, keeping her arms wrapped safely around the sleeping baby. "He wasn't eating the formula," she said, her voice growing a little stronger. "He kept pushing the bottle away, Mr. Harris. He was getting weaker. He was starting to fade away. I'm a baby nurse. I used to work in the hospital with newborns. My body still makes milk. He was hungry and he took it. He needed it, sir. I don't care what you think he needed." William took a step closer, his hands squeezed into tight fists. "You don't get to make that choice for my son." Grace's voice became firm and clear. "I did what any mother would do to save a child. You're not his mother." William snapped, the words feeling sharp in his mouth. Just then Adrian started to cry, a louder, fussier cry than before, and his little hands reached back toward Grace. William's jaw clenched so tight it hurt. "Get out," he said, the words cold and final. "You're finished here. Leave." No, the simple word hung in the air. William froze, stunned. "What did you just say to me?" "I said I'm not leaving." Grace looked him straight in the eye, not backing down an inch. "Not until I know for certain that he is safe." "You crossed a line you can't come back from," William said, his voice low and dangerous. "Your wife asked me to come here." The room suddenly became so quiet William could hear his own heartbeat thumping in his ears. The color drained from his face, leaving him feeling cold and dizzy. "What?" "Rebecca was my cousin," Grace said, and her voice didn't shake or waver at all. "She made me promise her before she died that I would watch over him, that I would protect him, that I would make sure he grew up knowing who he really was." William felt like the floor was moving under his feet. Rebecca, cousin, promise. All the feelings and secrets he had been trying to bury for 5 long months were bubbling up to the surface, and he couldn't push them down anymore. "You're lying," he whispered, but the words sounded weak even to him. "I'm not lying," Grace said. She shifted Adrian gently in her arms. "She recorded a message for you. Right before she went to the hospital to have the baby, she knew something was wrong, and she made me swear I wouldn't let you erase him, that I wouldn't let you hide who he is." William's hands started to tremble. Grace walked toward the bedroom door and then paused, looking back at him. "I made your wife a promise, Mr. Harris, and I don't break promises made to the dead." Then she was gone, slipping out into the hallway, and William was left standing all alone in the nursery, staring at the empty space where she had been, his mind spinning in crazy circles, his heart pounding like a drum, because somewhere deep down in a place he was too scared to visit, he knew she was telling the truth, and every single secret he had been hiding was about to come bursting out into the light. William stood alone in the nursery, staring at the empty rocking chair that was still moving just a little bit. His hands were still shaking. Down the hall, he could hear Adrian starting to cry again. It was that same weak, tired sound that had become the normal background noise of his life for months. He walked slowly to the crib and lifted his son, trying to hold him close and comfort him. But Adrian squirmed and wiggled, turning his face away from William as if he were a stranger. "It's okay, buddy," William whispered, but his voice cracked in the middle. "Daddy's here." But the baby wouldn't calm down. He kept fussing and twisting in William's arms, his little hands reaching toward the door, toward where Grace had gone, and something inside William's heart cracked right down the middle. His own son didn't want him. Quiet footsteps echoed in the hallway. The door opened again. Eleanor, William's mother, stood there, still wearing her old gardening clothes with a little dirt on her hands. She had heard everything. "I heard him laughing earlier," she said, her voice very quiet. "I was out in the garden and I heard it through the window. I've been waiting for 5 whole months to hear my grandson laugh." William didn't know what to say. Eleanor stepped closer, her kind eyes searching his face for answers. "William, what did that woman do? What line did she cross?" "What line?" William turned away, still holding the crying baby. Adrian was crying even harder now, his tiny body trembling. "She said." William's throat felt too tight to speak. "She said she knew Rebecca." Eleanor froze. "What?" "She said Rebecca was her cousin. That Rebecca asked her to come here and watch over the baby." The room suddenly felt very cold. Eleanor's voice dropped to a frightened whisper. "William, what haven't you told me about Rebecca? What's going on?" Before he could even try to think of an answer, there was a soft knock at the nursery door. Grace stood there. Her bag was over her shoulder, but she wasn't leaving the house yet. In her hand she held her phone tightly. "Before I go for good," she said quietly, "there's something you need to see." She looked at Eleanor, then her eyes locked on William. "Your wife recorded this the day she went into the hospital to have the baby." Grace's own voice trembled a little. "It was just hours before she died." William felt like his chest was caving in. Eleanor's hand flew up to cover her mouth. Grace stepped forward and placed the phone on top of the dresser. The screen was black, but William could see the date and time stamped on it. 5 months ago. The very day Rebecca died. "She knew something was wrong," Grace whispered. "She knew she might not make it through, so she left you a message. She wanted you to know the truth." Then Grace pressed the play button, and Rebecca's beautiful, tired face appeared on the screen, her hand resting on her very pregnant belly, and she began to speak. Rebecca's face filled the small screen. She looked so tired, more tired than William had ever seen her. Her skin was pale. Her eyes were red like she had been crying. But there was something else in her eyes too, a strong determination. "William," she said softly, her voice sounding weak but clear. "If you're watching this, then I'm already gone." William's legs couldn't hold him up anymore. He sank down into the rocking chair, still holding Adrian. Eleanor moved closer to watch, her hand still covering her mouth. On the screen, Rebecca took a shaky breath. "I need you to know some things that I never had the courage to say out loud while I was alive." Her hand rubbed slow circles on her big belly. "I love you. I've always loved you. But I've also been afraid of you." William's chest felt like a giant hand was squeezing it. "Not afraid that you would hurt me," Rebecca continued, tears beginning to slide down her cheeks. "But afraid of your silence. Afraid of the way you looked at me whenever I spoke my own language, Yoruba. Afraid of how small you made me feel when I wanted to call my mother back home." Eleanor let out a soft gasp. "I agreed to hide who I really was because I was young and in love. Because I thought loving you meant I had to give up parts of myself." Rebecca's voice cracked with emotion. "But every year it got harder. Every time I had to lie to your family about my past. Every time I had to pretend to be someone I wasn't. I felt like I was losing a little piece of myself." William felt like he couldn't breathe. "When I found out I was pregnant, I thought things would finally change. I thought you'd finally tell your family the truth. But you didn't." Rebecca wiped her eyes. 2 months into this pregnancy, I tried to leave. Do you remember that day?" William's hand started trembling so badly, he had to grip the baby tighter. "You begged me to stay. You promised me you would tell your father all about me, about where I was really from. You promised you'd introduce me to your whole family as I really am, Yoruba, Nigerian, African. You swore on our unborn baby that things would be different." Rebecca looked directly into the camera, her eyes burning with a mix of deep sadness and fiery anger. "But you never did. And now I'm lying here in this hospital bed. And the doctors keep using big, scary words like preeclampsia and high risk. And I'm so scared, William. Not of dying, but of disappearing forever." Her voice dropped to a heartbroken whisper. "If I don't survive this, I need you to promise me one thing. Don't erase our son the way you erased me." Little Adrian whimpered in William's arms. On the screen, Rebecca leaned closer, her face filling the whole frame. "His name is Oyewasala. It means God has done this. It's the name I chose for him, the name I wrote down. Please, please don't take that away from him." A single tear rolled down her cheek. "I've asked my cousin Grace to watch over him, to make sure he knows where he comes from, To make sure he hears my voice and my stories, even if I'm not there to speak to him. Rebecca's hand trembled as she reached a finger toward the camera, as if she could touch him one last time. I forgive you, William, but our son deserves better. He deserves to be whole, to be all of who he is. The screen went black. The room fell into a heavy, thick silence. William sat frozen in the chair, tears now streaming freely down his face. Eleanor was crying too, her hand pressed against the wall to keep herself steady. Grace stood quietly by the door watching them both. And then Eleanor turned to her son, her voice shaking with a kind of rage William had never, ever heard from his gentle mother before. Tell me you didn't do what I think you did, William. Tell me you didn't try to erase her. Eleanor's voice cut through the silence like broken glass. Tell me you didn't erase who she was. William couldn't look at her. He sat there holding Adrian, his face wet with tears. Mom, I don't know what you want me to say. Eleanor's hand was shaking. Don't you dare make excuses right now. She turned to Grace. How long have you known about all of this? Grace's voice was steady but soft. Rebecca called me 6 months ago, when she was about 2 months pregnant. She was crying so hard I could barely understand her. She said she had tried to leave, but William convinced her to stay. Eleanor closed her eyes, looking pained. She asked me to promise her something, Grace continued. If anything happened to her, I had to find a way into this house. I had to make sure Adrian knew who his mother really was. That he knew her family, her culture, her real name. William finally looked up, his voice breaking apart. She cut ties with her own family. She told me she wanted to. She told you what you wanted to hear, Grace interrupted, her tone becoming sharp. Because you made her choose between loving you and being loved by everyone else she loved. Eleanor turned back to her son, her eyes blazing with disappointment. What was she, William? What did you make her hide? The terrible question hung in the air. William's throat closed up. He couldn't say it, couldn't admit it out loud, but Grace said it for him. Rebecca was Nigerian. Yoruba. She was born in Lagos and raised partly there and partly in London. She had a big family. A mother, brothers, sisters, cousins, people who loved her so much. Grace's own voice cracked. People who begged her not to marry a man who seemed ashamed of her. Eleanor stumbled backward, gripping the edge of the dresser to keep from falling. You told me she was British. Just British. She was British. William said desperately. She grew up in London. She went to Cambridge. But she was Nigerian, Eleanor whispered, the truth dawning on her fully. And you hid it. You hid all of her. William looked down at Adrian. The baby had finally stopped crying, completely exhausted. His small chest rising and falling against William's shirt. Dad would have pulled all his funding from my company, William said, his voice barely a whisper. The whole business would have collapsed. I had investors, big contracts, everything depending on his support. So you chose money. Eleanor's voice was hollow now, empty of all its usual warmth. You chose your father's approval over your own wife's identity. William didn't answer. He had no answer. Eleanor walked to the window, staring out at the garden but seeing nothing. Did her family come to the funeral? Silence. William, did they come? No, why not? Because, William's voice broke completely. Because they didn't know she was dead. I didn't tell them. Not until weeks later. Eleanor spun around, her face twisted in pure horror. You didn't tell her own mother that her daughter had died? Grace stepped forward, pulling something from her pocket. A folded piece of paper. That's not all he did, she said quietly. She handed the paper to Eleanor. It was a copy of the birth certificate. Eleanor's hands trembled as she unfolded it and read it. Her eyes moved across the page, then stopped and widened in shock. Adrian James Harris, she whispered, reading the name aloud. Then she looked at William, her voice barely a breath. Where is Oyewasala? Where is his real name? William's face crumpled and Grace's voice came, soft but cold. He erased it. The day Rebecca died, while she was unconscious in the delivery room, he filled out the paperwork and changed the baby's name. He forged her signature on the documents. Eleanor let the paper drop from her fingers. It fluttered to the floor. Her hand flew to her chest as if her heart hurt. Outside, gravel crunched loudly in the driveway. A car door slammed shut. Grace's phone buzzed. She looked at the screen, then directly at William. "Rebecca's family just landed at the airport in Seattle," she said. "They're on their way here right now." William stood up slowly, still holding Adrian. His legs felt like weak rubber. "How long have they known?" he asked, dreading the answer. Grace looked at him, her expression impossible to read. "About me being here? About 3 weeks. About Rebecca being dead? 5 months. But they've been watching you for longer than that." The words hit William like stones thrown at his head. "Watching me? Rebecca's mother hired a lawyer 2 months after the funeral. They've been quietly building a legal case against you." Grace's voice was calm, just stating facts. "Emotional neglect, cultural erasure, fraud." Eleanor's face went pale. "Fraud?" Grace nodded toward the birth certificate lying on the floor. "Forging a legal document. Changing a child's name without the mother's consent while she was dying." She paused, letting the weight of it sink in. "That's a crime, Mrs. Harris." William felt the room tilt around him. "They want custody," Grace said quietly. "Joint custody at the very minimum. They want Adrian to know his mother's family, to spend time in Nigeria, to learn the Yoruba language." She looked directly into William's eyes. "They want him to know his real name." William's arms tightened around Adrian instinctively, pulling him closer. "They can't take him away from me." "They're not trying to take him away forever," Grace said. "They're trying to save him from becoming what you are right now. A man who is ashamed of where he comes from." The words cut deeper than anything else she had said. Eleanor walked over and gently, very gently lifted Adrian from William's arms. The baby went to her without any resistance, resting his head against her shoulder. She looked at her grown son, and William saw something in her eyes he had never seen before. Deep, deep disappointment. "You need to fix this, William," she said softly. "How?" William's voice cracked with despair. "How do I fix something this broken?" "I don't know," Eleanor said, kissing Adrian's head. "But you better figure it out before they get here. Because if you fight them, William, if you try to keep that family away from this child, you'll lose in court and you'll deserve to lose." She walked toward the door, then stopped. "Grace, you'll stay in the main house tonight. Use the guest room upstairs." Eleanor didn't wait for an answer. She was taking charge. "And William, you're going to sit down with Rebecca's family when they arrive. You're going to listen to them. And you're going to take whatever they have to say." Then she left, taking little Adrian with her down the hall. Grace and William stood alone in the quiet nursery. The silence between them felt huge and heavy. Finally, Grace picked up her bag from the floor. "I should go get settled in that guest room," she said. "Grace." William's voice was barely a whisper. Did Rebecca hate me at the end?" Grace turned to look at him, and for the very first time, her expression softened just a little bit. "No," she said. "She told me she loved you. That's what made everything so hard for her." Then she walked out, closing the nursery door softly behind her. William sank down to the floor, his back against the wall. And for the first time in 5 long empty months, he let himself feel everything he had been burying deep inside. The awful grief, the burning shame, the crushing heavy weight of what he had done. Downstairs, the doorbell rang. Voices echoed up through the house. Unfamiliar voices, speaking in the beautiful melodic language of Yoruba, a language William had spent years pretending he didn't understand. Rebecca's family had arrived. William heard them before he saw them. Voices in the entryway, soft but full of emotion, speaking in Yoruba. He stood frozen at the top of the stairs. Eleanor's voice joined theirs, calm and apologetic. "Please come in. I'm Eleanor, William's mother. I am so sorry for your loss." William forced himself to walk down the steps. 3 people stood in his foyer. An older woman in a beautiful deep purple dress, a colorful head wrap tied elegantly around her head. She had Rebecca's eyes, and they stared right back at him. Beside her stood 2 men, one older in glasses and a serious suit, the other younger, with a jaw tight with anger and his hands clenched into fists. The woman looked at William and the whole world seemed to stop turning. "Mr. Harris," she said quietly. Her accent was rich and warm. "I am Folake Oladipo, Rebecca's mother." William couldn't breathe. "These are my sons, Adedeo and Chidi." The younger one, Chidi, didn't move, didn't nod. He just stared at William with a look of pure hatred. "Where is my grandson?" Folake asked. Eleanor stepped forward gracefully. "He's upstairs sleeping. I can bring him down when he wakes." Folake's voice was gentle but very firm. "We need to speak with Mr. Harris first." They all moved into the formal sitting room. William felt like his legs might give out at any second. Folake sat on the sofa, her back straight, her hands folded neatly in her lap. Her son stood behind her like strong silent guards. 5 months, she said softly, and the sadness in her voice was overwhelming. "My daughter has been dead for 5 months and you never called. You never picked up the phone." William's mouth went completely dry. I didn't know how to." "You didn't want to," Chitty snapped, unable to hold back. "You wanted to keep pretending she just popped up out of nowhere. That she had no family, no history." "Chitty," Folake said, her tone firm but not unkind. He went silent, but his angry stare didn't waver. She looked back at William. "My daughter called me the night before she went into the hospital to have the baby. She was terrified. She said if something happened to her, you would erase everything about her." William's chest felt so tight he thought it might crack. "I told her she was wrong," Folake continued, her voice cracking slightly with emotion. "I told her you loved her, that you would honor her." She paused, gathering her strength. She said, "Mama, he loves me, but he's ashamed of me, and shame is a stronger feeling than love." The words hit William like a physical punch to the stomach. Adideo, the older brother, leaned forward slightly. "We are not here to fight with you, Mr. Harris, but we need to know one thing." He paused, making sure William was looking at him. "Can you love a child who looks like us? Who carries our blood and our history in his face?" William stared at him, tears burning hot in his eyes. "I don't know," he whispered, because it was the most honest thing he could say. Folake reached into her bag and pulled out a photograph. She slid it across the coffee table toward him. William's hand shook as he picked it up. It was a picture of Rebecca in full, glorious Nigerian bridal attire. Vibrant coral and gold fabrics, intricate beaded jewelry, her smile wide and radiant, surrounded by a huge, smiling family. She looked beautiful, happy, and completely alive. "That," Folake said quietly, "is the woman you tried to erase." William couldn't look away from the photo. It was a Rebecca he had never fully let himself see. Upstairs, Adrian started crying. Folake stood up immediately. "May I see him now?" she asked. Eleanor nodded. Before William could say or do anything, Rebecca's mother walked purposefully toward the stairs. Chitty leaned forward, his voice low and deadly serious. "You have 24 hours to decide, Mr. Harris. Either you make this right, publicly, or we take you to court and we will tell the whole story. What do you want?" William whispered, defeated. Adideo's voice was calm but cold. "We want his real name restored legally. We want our family to be a part of his life. And we want the truth to be told to everyone. To your family, to your friends." William looked up, his vision blurry with tears. "And if I say no?" Chitty's jaw tightened. "Then we will make sure the whole world knows exactly what kind of man you are." Upstairs, the crying suddenly stopped. Folake's voice drifted down the staircase, soft and beautiful. She was singing a lullaby in Yoruba. And then, cutting through the heavy silence of the house, came a sound that made William's heart stop. Adrian laughed. A real joyful baby giggle. Grace appeared at the top of the stairs, her face pale. "Mr. Harris," she said quietly, "there's something else you need to see." William's legs moved before his mind could catch up. He climbed the stairs, his heart hammering wildly. Grace stepped aside as he reached the top. Through the open nursery door, he saw her. Folake sat in the rocking chair, holding Adrian. The baby was nestled peacefully against her chest, calm and content, his tiny hand wrapped tightly around her finger. She was singing that same soft melody. And Adrian, his son, who never smiled for him, who barely made eye contact with anyone, was staring up at Folake's face as if he had been waiting his whole short life for this exact moment. William's throat closed up. Folake looked up and saw him standing in the doorway. Her eyes were wet with tears, but she didn't stop singing. When the lullaby ended, she spoke a few gentle words in Yoruba to the baby. Adrian cooed, actually responding to the sounds of his mother's language. William felt something deep inside his chest crack wide open. He knows, Grace whispered beside him. Babies remember sounds from when they were in their mother's belly. Rebecca must have sung to him and spoken to him in Yoruba every single day while she was pregnant. William's vision blurred completely. Folake pressed her lips gently to Adrienne's forehead, tears sliding down her cheeks. Then she spoke in English, her voice breaking with emotion. My daughter sang this same song to you when you were inside her, every single night. She wanted you to know her voice. She looked up at William, her eyes filled with a sorrow so deep it was bottomless. Even if she never got to hold you in her arms. William had to grip the door frame to keep himself standing. Eleanor appeared behind him, her hand gently touching his shoulder for support, but William couldn't move, couldn't speak. Folake stood up slowly, still holding Adrienne. She walked toward William, and for a moment he thought she was going to hand him the baby, but she didn't. Instead, she looked him directly in the eye. My daughter died believing you would protect him, she said quietly. But you didn't protect him. You tried to make him invisible just like you made her. The words cut deeper than any knife. Mrs. Oladipo, I didn't mean. Do you know what preeclampsia is, Mr. Harris? William blinked, confused by the sudden question. It's a pregnancy sickness, she continued, her voice steady now. It can be caused by terrible stress, by fear, by a mother's body feeling completely unsafe. William's blood ran cold. The doctors told me Rebecca's sickness got worse because of her emotional distress. Folake's grip on Adrienne tightened just a little protectively. She was carrying the heavy weight of hiding who she was, of being cut off from her family, of living every day in fear that you would stop loving her if she asked for too much of herself back. William felt his knees start to buckle. So when you ask yourself why my daughter is dead, Folake said, her voice now like steel, you remember this. She died trying to make herself small enough for you to love. The room spun around William. Eleanor gasped behind him. Downstairs, the doorbell rang again. Grace pulled out her phone, glanced at the screen, then looked at William. That's the lawyer, she said quietly. Rebecca's family brought the legal documents with them. They want you to sign them tonight. William looked at Folake, who was still holding his son. What documents? Adedayo appeared at the top of the stairs, a thick folder in his hand. A custody agreement, he said simply. Joint legal custody. Adrienne spends summers in Lagos with us. Mandatory cultural education. And his name legally, officially changed back to Adrienne Oyewasala Harris. He held out the folder. You have 1 hour to decide. William stared at the papers as if they were on fire. 1 hour to choose between keeping control and facing the truth, between the comfortable life he built on lies and the son he barely even knew. Folake turned and walked back toward the nursery, still holding Adrienne. And Mr. Harris, she said without looking back, if you say no, we will take this to a judge and we will win. The nursery door closed softly behind her, and William stood alone in the hallway, staring at the folder in Adedayo's outstretched hands. Downstairs, new voices echoed. The lawyer had entered the house. The clock was officially ticking. William sat alone in his dark office, the folder still unopened on his big empty desk. 1 hour. The house was silent now. Too silent. He could hear the muffled voices downstairs. Rebecca's family speaking with the lawyer, Eleanor's quiet, polite responses, Grace moving somewhere in the hallway. But up here it was just him and the crushing weight of everything he had done. He opened his desk drawer. Inside was a small wooden box he hadn't touched since the night Rebecca died. He lifted the lid. Inside was Rebecca's simple wedding band, a leather-bound journal, and a small USB drive with a label that read, for Oyewasala. His hand shook as he picked up the journal. He had read it only once, the night she died, and then he had locked it away because the words inside were too painful, too true. But now he opened it again. The pages were filled with her neat, careful handwriting. Words that were now breaking his heart all over again. Month 3. I wonder if our baby will have my mother's laugh. William says he wants him to look like me, but I don't think he means all of me. Just the parts he can show to other people. William's throat tightened painfully. Month 5. I tried to leave today. I packed a bag. Called Mama. But William cried. He begged me. He promised me things would change. And I believed him because I wanted to believe him so badly. Because I am so tired of being angry. Because love shouldn't feel this lonely. Asterisk his chest ached with a fresh, sharp pain. Asterisk month 7. I asked him again about telling his father the truth about me. He said, soon. He always says soon. I'm starting to realize that soon means never. Asterisk William's vision blurred as the tears came. Asterisk month 8. The doctors say I'm high risk. They keep using words like complications and stress. They asked me if I have support at home. I lied. I said yes. But the truth is I have never felt more alone. I'm carrying a child in a house that doesn't really want me. And I'm scared. Not of dying, but of him growing up the way I have lived. Hidden, erased, ashamed. Asterisk William closed the journal, his whole body trembling. She knew. She had known all along what he was doing to her. And she had stayed anyway, hoping he would change. A soft knock broke the terrible silence. Eleanor stepped inside, her face drawn and tired. They're waiting for your answer, she said quietly. William didn't move. Eleanor sat down in the chair across from his desk. What are you going to do, William? I don't know. Yes, you do. Her voice was firm but not unkind. You've always known what the right thing is. You're just afraid of what it will cost you. William looked up at her, his eyes pleading. What if I lose everything, Mom? You already lost everything, Eleanor said, her own eyes filling with tears. The moment Rebecca died and you decided to keep on lying, you lost it all. The words settled over him like cold, gray ash. She loved you, William. Despite everything, she loved you. Eleanor's voice cracked. But love isn't enough when the person you love makes you disappear. William dropped his head into his hands. I didn't mean to hurt her. I loved her. I know you did, Eleanor said, reaching across the desk to touch his trembling hand. But meaning well doesn't erase the harm you caused. And that beautiful baby boy upstairs deserves so much better than your fear. Footsteps approached down the hall. Adideo appeared in the office doorway. Time is up, Mr. Harris, he said. What is your answer? William stood up slowly, his legs feeling weak and unsteady. He looked at the folder, at Rebecca's journal, at his mother's sad, hopeful face. Then he picked up the papers. I need to see him first, William said quietly. I need to see my son. Adideo stepped aside without a word. William walked down the hall toward the nursery, his heart pounding so hard it felt like it was trying to escape. He opened the door. Folake sat in the rocking chair, still holding Adrian, who was now fast asleep, his small face perfectly peaceful against her chest. She looked up at William, and for the first time he didn't see just anger in her eyes. He saw a grief as deep as the ocean. He looks just like her, William whispered. He is her, Folake said softly. Every single part of him. William took a step closer. I am so sorry. For everything. For what I did to Rebecca. For what I've been doing to him. Folake studied him for a long, quiet moment. Sorry is the beginning, she said. But it is not enough. She stood and walked toward him. Then, slowly and carefully, she placed the sleeping Adrian into his arms. William held his son. Really truly held him for the first time in weeks. And Adrian, this tiny child who had been rejecting him for so long, didn't pull away or fuss. He just breathed small, steady, sleeping breaths against William's shoulder. His name is Oyewosala, Folake said. It means God has done this. Rebecca chose it because she believed this child was a gift from God, even when everything else in her life was falling apart. William's tears fell silently onto Adrienne's soft blanket. I'll sign the papers, he whispered. Folake nodded slowly. But then she said something that made William's blood run cold all over again. There is one more thing you need to know before you do. William looked at Folake, still holding his son close. What do you mean? Folake walked to the window, her back to him for a moment. Rebecca didn't just record one video message, William. There were 3. William's stomach dropped to the floor. One for you, one for Adrian to watch when he's older, and one for me. She turned around, her eyes filled with something William couldn't quite name. Forgiveness, maybe, or just immense heartbreaking love. In my video, she told me something she never told you. Folake's voice trembled. She said that if she died, you would try to keep us away from the baby, that you would fight to maintain control, that your pride would be stronger than your love. William felt his knees weaken. He had to lean against the crib. But she also said something else. Folake stepped closer. She said, "Mama, if William ever changes, if he ever truly sees what he has done, please forgive him. Because God already has." The words pierced through William's darkness like a pure, bright light. "I don't deserve that," he whispered, utterly broken. "No," Folake agreed quietly. "You don't. But my daughter believed in grace. She believed people could change, even when they didn't deserve a second chance." Her voice softened just a little. "I am here because of that belief, not because I think you have earned it." William looked down at Adrian, sleeping so peacefully in his arms. "What do I do?" His voice broke completely. "How do I even start to fix this?" "You start by telling the truth," Folake said. "All of it. To your father. To your business partners. To the whole world." William's chest tightened with a familiar, cold fear. "My father will cut me off. He'll ruin the company. I don't care what your father will do." Folake's tone hardened with a mother's protective fierceness. "My daughter lost everything. Her joy, her family, her very life, to protect your comfort. Now you have to choose. Your father's approval or your son's soul." The room fell into a deep, waiting silence. Downstairs, the voices,